Hi, everyone. So this is the shortened form of the Athens and Sparta lecture. And in this lecture, we're going to try to really focus in on similarities and differences between Athens and Sparta. But we want to try and relate those to our two learning goals as much as we can regarding religion. And we also really want to look for the larger themes. Please do not copy down notes that are on each of these slides. These are meant to give you a more detailed look than you probably need, but it's in an effort to paint a fuller picture of each of them so that you can start to make some inferences and really look at each city-state. The first thing to remember is that these city-states are the thing with which people in ancient Greece are going to identify themselves with. They're not going to call themselves Greeks. They're going to refer to their city-states. I'm from Delphi. I'm an Athenian. I'm a Spartan. I'm a Thessalian. I'm an Akkadian. Their lives revolve around their city-states. And that means pride, everything from when they eventually compete in the ancient Olympic Games, starting in 776 BCE, all the way up through the time periods that we're going to be talking about here, really about 500 BCE, up through the Roman conquest in the 100s BCE. So Athens and Sparta, we're going to make reference to some of the things from the movie 300. Does have a little bit of a more mature rating. Please ask your parents if you're going to watch it, but it does have a lot of historical accuracy. So if you hear me alluding to things in there, if you've seen it before, might be helpful. If not, that's fine. You're more than welcome to ignore it. So Athens is located northeast of Sparta, and what's key here is that it's on the Aegean coast. And when these places are located on coastlines, we know a couple of things pretty much right off the bat. We know that they most likely are going to rely on trade to get everything that they need. And we know that more likely than not, they have to have a navy so that they can keep these trading ships in line. So in terms of Athens, the Athenian navy is by far the naval power within the local Mediterranean region during this time. The government itself, it has different pieces to it, but what we really want to keep in mind is that this is the world's first democracy. It is the first time that we're seeing any sort of democratic process take place. And that's really something that here in the United States, we want to really look to. Now, this is not the democracy that we have here. That's not the democratic process that we have here. But Cleisthenes, by establishing the first democratic constitution, is establishing this concept that everyone who hits certain benchmarks, in this case, we're talking male citizens over the age of 20, is able to take part in the government itself. And that's really going to shape the way that Athens runs everything from education to what they really focus on within the city-state. For the Athenian government, we have different pieces to it. You can read through these. Again, this is probably more detailed than we need, but it's in an effort to gain a fuller understanding of the type of democracy that Athens has as a city-state. We have the assembly, which is everybody, and we kind of fold in the positions of judges to the positions of army captains or army generals, naval admirals, those sorts of things too. And then the Council of 500, and this makes a lot of sense because while everybody in Athens is expected to take part in the assembly, who is eligible, not everybody is a part of the Council of 500, but you have to be ready in case you are a part of the Council of 500. So that means you need to be prepared in order to fully engage in those particular activities that the Council of 500 deals with. Think of it like the basic daily business of Athens. The main goal of Athens is to have the most educated people on earth, and so their government is looking to do those same things. Again, no women, no girls. It's men who are going to be doing this, but their goal is to be as educated as possible, and that's going to inform all of the decisions they make in terms of education. The male citizens are expected to educate their sons. We don't have public education yet. That's really not something that we see until at least a little bit into medieval Europe, but maybe a little bit Renaissance time period at various points in time, mostly private education. Private school, a tutor like Socrates, private school like Plato's Academy, Aristotle, these different philosophers developed their own schools of thought as well. In Athenian society, as I mentioned, the women really do not play a large role. They are property of the husbands. They're there as placeholders, basically. That's it. They're there to be in charge of the family and That's kind of, it is what it is. But then you can see, and if you want to pause the video and take a closer look at some of these areas of Athenian society, we have this hierarchy in place. The slaves are not technically a part of this hierarchy because they're not considered any sort of citizen whatsoever. In terms of education, it's what we would today refer to as a liberal arts education. That's pretty much what you kids go through up through high school. You're doing reading and math and poetry and music and practicing sports and activities. Those are the types of things that Athenians focused on. And if you think about back to their goal, this really makes sense. If they need everybody to be able to kind of synthesize problems that are going on and then be able to react to those problems and make decisions based on those, then it makes sense that they would be well-rounded in a lot of ways. Thanks, Chelsea. Appreciate the help. Athenian citizenship, they became citizens at the age of 18, had to take an oath of citizenship at the Temple of Zeus. So again, relating things back to the religion, the mythology from ancient Greece, etc. This is the temple located right here. In the background, you can actually see the Acropolis. So when I went to Athens, I was standing right up here. I never actually made it down to the Temple of Zeus, but I was able to kind of peer over the edge and look down at the temple from there, which is pretty cool. Sparta. Now we're moving on to Sparta, and Sparta is located on the Peloponnesus. And the Peloponnesus, again, just like Mycenae, as we see over here, land-based. So they're close to the coastline, but it's not a coastal city, and that makes a big difference. So in terms of a military, instead of focusing on the Navy, they're going to focus on the Army, and we'll see how that folds into daily life. Different groups that they had, Helots and Perioeci, slaves who were working the land for agricultural reasons, or merchants and artisans who lived in villages, creating things, crafting things. Notice that none of these are the Spartan citizen men, and there's a reason for that. And that goes back to the very first slide in all of this, which is, what is your profession? There's a famous scene in 300 where King Leonidas and his approximately 300 Spartans meet up with Greek soldiers from another city-state ready to defend themselves against the Persian invasion. And that's going to be the next part of this Greek unit. And Leonidas is surprised as he comes upon these Acadians, and the Acadians say, well, we expected Sparta to supply more than its fair share of soldiers and warriors, but this is all you brought was this small band of people. And Leonidas kind of chuckles to himself and then says, you, sir, and points to one of them and says, what profession are you? And he says, I'm a potter. He means potter. And you, farmer, and you, cooper. And he says, Spartans, what is your profession? And they all give this hardcore battle cry and pound on their shields. And the point there is Spartan men do not have any other profession besides being a warrior. That is their entire goal in life, and that informs each step of the process. Starting with their government. Their government is really an oligarchy. They have anywhere from 2 to 15 kings at various points in time throughout Sparta's kind of heyday. And these are the people who give the orders. And if you think about what in a military matters the most, it's following orders. So this concept of being the strongest militarily is going to inform the way that they move forward with their government, trying to ensure that they follow orders. That doesn't mean that they completely disregard everybody else. As you see, the assembly passes laws, decides questions of war and peace altogether, and it's a large group. So it does have this democratic component to it, but ultimately it's the kings who have final say. Sparta's main goal, as I mentioned, be the strongest people, military in Greece. Just a quick note, that is not Mr. Densmore there in the bottom left-hand corner. I know that maybe kind of looks like it, and that's not Mr. Densmore. Maybe. How did Spartans achieve their goal? Well, it starts with education, really from birth. If they are not considered healthy, they are left on a hillside to die. And the idea here, it's not, I know that this seems harsh, and it is harsh for sure, but physical deformities, issues with breathing, you don't want those genes passed on if you're trying to be the strongest possible polis. So in their minds, that's their way to make sure that those genes don't get passed on. We know the study of eugenics is pretty much scientific garbage at this point in time. These are some similar things that Hitler and Mussolini will subscribe to, Hitler's experiments that Dr. Joseph Mengele are going to do. We know that eugenics doesn't really work as an actual science, but that was their theory. And I know it seems really, really harsh, but there's a religious component to this as well. The idea being, okay, you leave these children on the hillside. If the gods really want them to live, they will make sure that those children live. And we see this a lot in the Greek myths, where either to try and evade the prophecy of an oracle that this child is left there, and invariably this child is picked up by farmers and grows up to this half-god person, does all these great things. But that's the impetus for why Sparta does what they do. In addition, the education is going to start very, very young at age 7. But whereas Athens dealt with a liberal arts education, Sparta is dealing with a military education. Very, very harsh. You can read some of the things that they're asked to do really from the time that they're 7 years old. At the age of 12, they are no longer provided food. Steal food or starve. Those are your options. And don't get caught. If you do get caught, you will be beaten with reeds. You will be whipped. You do not want to get caught. And then by age 16, they're forced to kill a slave, simulating what it's going to be like in battle. You don't want your warriors to all of a sudden freeze up in the midst of battle. And so as a result, you want to try and stamp that out pretty early on. Spartan women. Also, this is the difference between Sparta and Athens. At age 18, assigned to a husband, Spartan women, it's the quote from the movie 300 is, only Spartan women give birth to real men. And she's talking, the wife of the queen is talking to an envoy from Persia. And the Persian envoy is like, yo, you can't talk to me, you're a woman. What makes you think you can do this? And she says, only Spartan women give birth to real men. That strength from the women is really a hallmark of Sparta, and that's very, very different than most civilizations during this time period. Domestic chores, those don't really matter to Spartan women. It's produce strong men. Make sure that your sons are strong. They could own their own property. The men are going to be off fighting battles because that's their profession. So it's the women's job to ensure that the property is safeguarded, that business goes as usual, whatever it may be. And then finally, a very famous quote that's often attributed to Spartan women is, come home with your shield or on it. And this is something that kind of like a mantra that they would send to their husbands as they left. The idea being, come home with your shield in victory or come home upon your shield in death. Do not come back here a loser. Do not disgrace our family name. Do not disgrace the city-state of Sparta. Again, this concept that your city-state matters more than anything else. So that pride in your city-state really pops here. If you have any questions, please let me know. We're going to eventually look at Venn diagrams with this, so be thinking of comparing and contrasting, and be thinking about how these things relate in some way to the learning goals that we've covered so far. Have a great day.